3 years ago to the day, I started construction of the Brown Smith Railroad version 2.0. It was a double-deck railroad with a double-track main, and it was double the trouble. It was wrought with problems, and I eventually got so tired of working on it that I dismantled it in favor of the Brown Smith Railroad version 3.0. This is a more simple, elegant, easier to maintain railroad with great viewing angles, and I'd like to take you through some of the highlights of how I constructed it. If you like what you see by the time we're done, make sure and subscribe, and welcome to It's My Railroad. Okay, a couple things I'll share with you just before we get going. Thing number one is this is not a how-to video. All right, I've got all kinds of videos here at It's My Railroad and playlists showing you how I do benchwork, sub-road bed, lay track, and all that kind of crap. So what I could have done is just make videos for the sake of making videos, just throw whatever piece of junk out there that I think you guys might want to pick up on, or I could show you a video of something that I am excited about, passionate about. Brown Smith Railroad version 3.0 is that. I can't wait to take you on the tour of this. Second thing is, I changed my philosophy for modeling. Rather than getting all the sidings in everywhere and the spurs and whatever, I left myself provision for that, but my intention was to get my yard in, which I'll show you in a second, and to connect it to the existing scenes that I kept, and then get my train running, baby, because my ultimate thing, I love switching ops and stuff like that, but what I really like is watching my trains run. I like to rail fan my own trains. So here's the deal. I shot a video for the members that talks a bit about the bench work, and I'm gonna roll back and show you the highlights of that video right now. I built my bench work. I didn't really shoot it for video because it was just me, and I've screwed together wood before on camera. You wanna see how I do it? Find the videos, there's like 4 of them. Little boring. I just recycled a bunch of stuff. All these 1x3s this is built from came from the old layout. The 2x4 legs came from walls that, matter of fact, I used to have a wall right here. Remember that wall I had? It kind of made a cave in here. I wasn't really happy with the cave. It sounded like a great idea when I started. It turned out to be not so great. So right now I'm actually shooting this from the opposite side of the layout, and it's really wide open and bright in here. I really like it. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. This deck sits at about this height. I don't know what height it is. Where's my tape measure? Hold on a second. Ta-da! This thing sits, well, depending on where you stand in my garage, because it slopes away, so it's whatever. Let's go in the middle. And we're just gonna say we're at 55 inches. Let's put that right. We'll put this, it's over there. 55 inches, and I'm 6'3". That works for me. You can see here, this is all the scrap I have left over. I gotta load all this junk into my truck and go dump it in a dumpster somewhere. But I was able to build this whole thing without buying any materials. I used screws and lumber and everything from the old layout. And you can see here in the backyard, I've still got more lumber left over. I'm saving some smaller pieces and stuff for reinforcement here and there. I might need to put some cross bracing on the legs, but right now, this thing's pretty secure, pretty happy with it. But one of my favorite things that's underneath this railroad that I gotta show you right now, it's the most important tool in the hobby room. Check this out. Yep, that's my beer fridge. You can't have a model railroad without a beer fridge, bro. This section is 12 feet long from the backdrop to the end of it. Now, it used to be like 12 foot, well, it used to be 13 feet, 12'6", something like that. And I shortened it up a little bit to give us more passage through there because I got my freezer over there and the wife walks by there to get to her car and junk. This direction here, it's 11 feet 6 inches. It used to be 12 and a half feet. And so I sucked it this way a little bit, again, to give Cindy Brown, my wife, the first lady model railroading, more room on that side. The idea was to scale this down, to make it more manageable, to have something that maybe I can complete within my lifetime. And so that's what's gonna happen. So what has to happen next, however, is I need to start screwing down the OSB. You see, I've got all this OSB left over here, and OSB's got like one sort of smooth and shiny side and one really crappy side. So smooth and shiny up, crappy down. After the benchwork was done, basically I took the leftover OSB I had from the walls, some of the shelves, and even pieces of the layout where I hadn't scenic to them. I had to chuck all the stuff that had scenery on it. And I laid it out, did not screw it down, traced out where I wanted the track to go, and then marked out where I wanted the grade changes to be, and cut everything and used risers to get it to the proper elevations. Well, there you go. That's how I did the bench work and sub-road bed using recycled materials. Matter of fact, I recycled every piece of track you see here and every turnout. Didn't buy anything new for that. Did have to buy some new cork road bed though, because trying to salvage that is a fool's errand. Anyway, now it's time for the big tour of the railroad. We're gonna start right here at the Bentleyville yard. First thing I wanna show you is these tracks aren't exactly straight. They're a little bit squirrely, and that's by design. Normally what I'll do is put a straight edge down there, line, oh, look at this. We got lumber coming off of a freight car. Let's see if we can fix that in flight. Boom, done. Normally I'd make them laser straight like a brand new yard, but this is an older yard. And so I sort of eyeballed the tracks, and I really liked the way it came out. So anyway, it's my railroad. That's how I chose to do it. Over here, this is my storage track for that demonstration train you see running around. It's also doubles down further down that way as my interchange track. I'll be able to drop cars off there. They get sent off into the world somewhere, and then take new ones and put them up into my yard. This is basically an arrival departure track. When the trains come back from the layout, they'll pull onto here, and the locomotives will uncouple, make it through this runaround, and then back over here where I keep locomotives that aren't being used. And then the switcher for the yard will come grab those cars and distribute them to my classification tracks. Speaking of which, I have 4 classification tracks. Now I'm gonna have 6 scenes ultimately on the railroad, so 6 classification tracks would have been great, but it's a smaller railroad, and some of these tracks are pretty long. I think it'll be okay to fiddle around with what I've got going there. Back here in the back, this track right here is, I'm gonna model a RIP track, a repair in place track, where I can bring cars in, service the cars, and then shoot them back out onto the railroad. Right now I've got this Southern Pacific locomotive and a track cleaning car stored there, so I can just pull it out, fill it with isopropyl alcohol, and run it on the railroad. This, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that this right here was going to be modeled after a prototype, but it's a 2-stall maintenance facility. It needs a little work, and at some point maybe we'll make a video just on how I'm going to restore that. But what I'll do for now is keep my some of my locomotives over here, maybe something stored inside, but I finally have a place that I can use it. This track here is a track that I'm going to set up a fueling and sanding station on to help make the road a little bit more realistic. That ought to be fun. And back here, this is a kit-bashed model I did for Model Railroader magazine that is for heavy maintenance. And it's got lights in it. Someday I'll light it up. And so I'll be able to put a locomotive in there, kind of like that. That's getting serviced. And Bob's your uncle. So basically that is the Bentleyville yard. Well, there you go. That is the Bentleyville yard. It used to be back here on the old railroad. I also had the Brownsville yard down there. I had the staging yard in the back. Now I've just got one yard with fewer tracks, simpler, more elegant, easier to maintain, and a lot more detail I can put up in there with some different structures and stuff like that. But anyway, before we move on with the rest of the tour, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my wiring. I am using this Cat 6 Ethernet cable. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I started using that about halfway through the 2.0 build. Well, I'm using it exclusively now. I've taken one of these cables and run it out to each of the major locations. And then within it, I've got these 8 wires, which are color coded. I'm using the brown set for my DCC. I'm using the blue set for my 9-volt wiring, the green set for my 5-volt wiring, and the orange set I'm just reserving for some kind of controls or something down the line. But it'll all be in a location, all coming from the place that my power supply is, my DCC is. So if you haven't wired your railroad, I highly recommend this Cat6 cable. Other guys have done it, but I got to tell you something. I really like it. Oh, by the way, I use it for my feeders too, because it's really small. It's like 28 gauge wire, easy to solder to an N gauge set of tracks. So anyway, wiring in place, let's continue with the tour of the Brownsmith Railroad. When the train leaves the Bentleyville yard, the first thing it's going to do is pass by the town of Bentleyville, which ultimately will have some rail-served industries in it, plus just a bunch of buildings. It's going to be a town by the time I've done. I've made a provision right here to put in a turnout. I made this really straight, so I could put in a turnout so the trains can make their way back in there to whatever industries. I was also able to salvage this retaining wall. Now this came off the back of the railroad, one of the last videos I did before I dismantled my railroad, where I built this really cool retaining wall. Well, I pulled it off and put it back in here. Really like the way it came out. While we're standing here though, I got to tell you, this is basically the best vantage point to see the railroad. From here, I can pretty much see all of the track and see the trains running. There's lots of great vantage points here where you can see the train running nearly the whole time. And my old railroad, the trains used to disappear behind the railroad. I couldn't see them for about half the time they were running. And then when they did reappear, sometimes it was up here and sometimes it was down here. And either way, if I didn't sit in a chair or whatever, it was a pain in the backside. So I really like this better. Let's move over to where the future Brownsville is going to go. Presently, it's just acreage. It's an unincorporated plot of land in Brownsmith County. Like the other scenes on the railroad that I haven't developed yet, I've allowed myself back here a provision to put in a turnout and to feed some rail-served industries once I decide how I want this thing to lay out. And that's the thing, you know, a lot of times you'll see people that completely plot their railroad, every siding, every structure and everything, and that's cool if that's who you are. That's not who I am. I don't know what I want to put here yet. I don't know what it's going to look like, but what I do know is I don't want to spend the next 3 years looking at plywood while I try to freaking figure it out. So what I'm going to do, like the other scenes, is scenic it over, and I'll decide later what I want to do, baby. Now, let's head over to another scene. This is a scene to be named later. I have some thoughts about making this the new Port Smith. If you remember, I used to have a port on the bottom deck. It was really big though. I can't put that back up in here, but I have a lot of port models lying around. I got the crane, I got containers, I got barges, I got all kinds of stuff. So I might do that here, but that's going to require some invasive bench work. Not looking forward to it. For now, we're just going to scenic it over. But for whatever I put here, I've got this track here that will be a dead end now. It's a tail track for this little runaround track I have here to be able to switch out cars. And when I decide what goes here, I can extend that track around and feed those industries. Next stop after passing that runaround track is the town of Riley. Now this is an existing town that I had on the old railroad, although I have relayed some track and I changed the geometry of this turn. But in it, I've got the Brownsmith Global Distribution Warehouse and something I'm working on for Model Railroader Magazine, which is a scratch-built project here called Star Industries. It makes pet food, it receives raw materials and ships out finished goods that I'll distribute somewhere out on the railroad. But anyway, I've got to finish this scene for the piece I'm doing for Model Railroader. So that's probably the next thing you're gonna see get done. From Riley, the train goes up and around one of 2 loops I have on the railroad. It goes up around this loop and off to one of my signature scenes here at the town of Carleton. This is arguably my favorite scene I've ever built as a model railroader. This is based on an HO scale track plan for a project railroad that David Pop and the gang built on Model Railroader Video Plus. I scaled it down to fit this space. Now, if you want to see how I did that, go to trains.com or MRVP and type in Scale It Down with Steve Brown. That's amazing. It's got a ring to it. And they'll show you how I built some of this. But one of the things you won't see, because I haven't shot it yet, baby, is Cindy Brown, my wife, the first lady of model railroading, and I are going to run ops up here together in the same way they did with their project. She'll be the engineer and I'll be the conductor. She's pretty excited and nervous to be running trains with me on camera, but it's a great husband-wife thing to do, and I can't wait to get on it. I love this scene so much that I saved it, and it ultimately is controlling the elevation for the rest of the railroad. Way back here, I connected to it and extended that around. I kept the benchwork at that level, I ran the track at that level, and I just love it. I love switching ops up here. It's a little dusty right now from all the construction I've done. I'm trying to keep it clean, people.
But it just got dirty anyway.
And basically, this is the end of my point-to-point railroad. Wait a minute, Steve. You just said point-to-point railroad. And yet, I'm watching this mixed freight train go round and round in a loop. Yes, that is correct. Normal operations, I'll send trains up here to Carleton into Riley, swap them out, and send them back to the yard. But when I get guests coming over, like I've got coming over for Christmas, hello, my son's coming with my new granddaughter, boom, granddad again. Anyway, I got like 5 grandkids now. I know, I don't look that old, do I? Let's move on. From Carleton, I have a return loop that goes all the way back around to my second loop on the railroad, which ends at the Bentleyville yard for continuous running. Now, downstream of the Carleton scene, I've got the scene of Calanty Flats. This is where I used to have, actually in this same location, back in the day, my cement plant that I scratch built. Still got the model, still want to use it, but I got a lot more real estate here than I had before, so I'm not exactly certain how I will tie all that together, but again, I made a provision to put a turnout in later on when I feel like it. Right here in front, this area here is where I intend to put the historic town of Switch Junction. Now listen, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that Switch Junction is one of the first scenes I've ever built as a model railroader. Matter of fact, it's my second, maybe tied for first, but second favorite scene, only tied with Carleton that I just showed you. And what I want to do is take those structures and place them in sort of a visitor center, a place where people can come and see the Old West. And in that scene, I will feature some of my old logging camp structures and things like a 2-truck shade that my friend Shannon Tapia down here, Shannon Tapia, I tried to say it with an Australian accent and got lost, down under, sent me, put that shay on display, put some of the logging cars and stuff on display, and just make a scene that's not necessarily rail served, but will be of interest to people that come view my railroad. Now, you may have noticed a whole bunch of white scenery in the background as we've been taking this tour. And what that is white styrofoam. I bought a 4x8 sheet by 1 inch thick, insulation styrofoam, and cut it into pieces, carved it a little bit, and stuck it into position. Then I covered that in Sculpt-A-Mold rather than my normal go-to, which is drywall joint compound. In this case, there's so many seams in all the pieces of styrofoam I put there that the joint compound will just crack and all that. In places I don't want cracks, so the Sculpt-A-Mold fixes that problem. Plus, I really like the texture. Now, it's really hard to get to, but once I'm done scenicking it, I don't need to get to it anymore. And matter of fact, that's going to be in a future video. You're going to see how I detail this mountain using some new techniques that I've developed, and hopefully that'll be a lot of fun. Hey, if you want to see more of Steve Brown model railroading, you can go to trains.com or Model Railroader Video Plus. I got some good stuff over there. I also wrote an article and shot a video for the Ultimate Guide to Model Railroading 4 for Model Railroader magazine. And of course, our channel members get regular updates, regular posts, behind the scenes kind of stuff of what we're doing here. So go check any of that out if you want to see more blah, blah, blah from me. But thank you so much for joining me today on this video at It's My Railroad. I sure had a ton of fun working on this. I hope you had a ton of fun watching the video. Until I see you again, my name is Steve Brown, and rail on, my friends.